Hi guys. It's me. I'm back again. This time, I'm joining you from Budapest. I would totally sort of show you the view from my hotel room, but sadly, our computer program that lets me record myself while I'm also showing you a slideshow is still on the fritz. So I'm happy to report that at least it's like a West Lafayette problem and not just PNW. So it's not our university's fault. Anyway, I hope everybody's doing good. So I wanted to start out by removing something from the syllabus. I promise I'll never add more. I may occasionally, once in a while, take something off. I had on the schedule a paper proposal due on the 22nd, and what I had been thinking about was that would be a proposal for SA2, but I think that I've got a good enough sense of what everyone is planning to do from your discussion board this week, so I think we're just going to cancel that. So never mind about that paper proposal that you will see on the course schedule. Okay, so I have just about finished going through everybody's discussion board posts, and I think you guys can be a lot of use to each other this week in particular on the discussion board by helping each other to brainstorm more ideas about analyzing your commercials. I think that most of us have our feet in in the sand there. Like things are going pretty well for just about everybody. Everybody's found a commercial that could work, and most of you are at the point where you're starting to figure out what kinds of values or beliefs are being reinforced by the commercial. But where just about everybody is at is the point where you've got to kind of start going deeper. And that is what most of my comments on that discussion board are kind of all about, are helping you guys to sort of figure out how to take your analysis deeper. A lot of you, for example, chose commercials, smartly, I think, chose commercials where the value or belief that's being promoted is kind of a little bit on the surface, like it's, one of those, like those, commercials that are pretty clearly about values, right? Where no one would really disagree with you that this commercial is about a value. And so that's totally fine as a strategy, but it does mean that you still have to go deeper with your analysis, right? Remember how we defined analysis last time, which was that it means going beneath the surface, right? That it's about figuring out something, figuring out what's underneath that surface. So, every single one of you, from what I've seen on the discussion boards, has room to go deeper. And so watch each other's commercials and help each other figure out what more to say, where to go. One strategy for going deeper, I think, is simply to get more specific. So for example, if you have figured out that your commercial is definitely about some kind of family values, one next step is to start breaking down exactly what that means. I mean, same thing if your commercial is about patriotism or whatever, right? Start breaking it down. Start figuring out exactly what that means in this particular context. And almost always things will start to get pretty interesting at that point, right? That perhaps family values is all about dads protecting little girls, right? That there's this gender thing having to do with family values. Sometimes somebody's commercial was about this military family, where when I looked at the commercial, it seemed it was I could not help but go to an analysis where the family values are there to kind of make us not think about the military. That really what the military is fighting for is not changing a regime in another country or whatever. It's about home, right? It's about family, which might be a strategy for us to to discourage us from thinking about what the military is actually doing. So there's lots and lots of ways to go, but start looking at the details of the commercial, right? Why why those specific details. You've got to figure out what they're doing there. You have to figure out what they're contributing. Like, for example, that commercial that we talked about last week, the Roseanne Barr Lumberjack Snickers commercial. Roseanne Barr kind of just comes in at the end of that commercial, and she gets like smacked down by this log, right? And it's such a commercial that's about manly men doing manly things, right? Doing all this like blue collar work. And Roseanne Barr's position in that commercial seems pretty strange. It seems it's like she doesn't really fit into that context. And I think that so that is a place where with my analysis I have to go, right, to try to figure out how that's working, why that fits in. And the best way that I could come up with to explain that is that she kind of gets taken out as a joke because she doesn't fit into that context, right? She can't be recuperated and turned into a manly man because she's not a man. Even if she's not a super feminine, fragile looking woman or whatever, she still can't be recuperated the way the male comic is to become one of the lumberjacks. Instead, she has to be the butt of the joke, which suggests to me how masculine that commercial's values are. So what I'm saying is, like, get in there further. Start talking about the specifics. The other way that you can figure out how to take your analysis further is to think more specifically about contrasting your commercial with Scholes' commercial. And I think that there's, how are the values that are being supported similar, and how are they different? And what kinds of conclusions might we be drawn to from those similarities and those differences? Like, for example, someone, I think it's Paige, is going to write about one of those Dove soap commercials about women's bodies. And one of the things that I was thinking about when I was reading her post is that in Scholes' commercial, the umpire has to achieve something, right? That commercial is about a meritocracy, right? That is to say that if you work hard and you're talented, you will be rewarded. And Paige's commercial is like not really, that's not where it goes, right? It's not like work really hard and then you'll be attractive women. That's not it. It's like all women should be fine with their bodies, should be comfortable with their bodies. And that's an interesting shift in ideology. And so thinking about those specific connections, I think, can be useful and can be interesting and can give your paper more places to go. So anyway, get more specific and then think about specific contrasts with Scholes' commercial. Those are both sort of little engines of analysis. Or potential engines of analysis, places where you can start generating more and more analysis. Okay, so I want to start thinking some more about introductions. So introductions are hard. They should be hard. If you often feel like you have a hard time writing intros, that's like a good sign, right? Because they're really important and they're really, really hard because to write a good introduction, you need to have a very clear sense of all of the parts of your paper and where it goes. And it's basically impossible to have that when you're writing your first draft, right? So you've pretty much always got to, you've got to start somewhere, right? I don't know. I went through a phase where I didn't write introductions first when I was drafting, but now I always do, and I think my writing is better when I actually write an introduction, but I always wind up having to change it when I revise, and there's no shame in that. So one initial piece of advice is to not start too broadly when you're starting with your intro. Don't start with the dawn of time. Don't start with the dinosaurs. Don't start with America, right? Start with your commercial or start with Scholes, right? This is a very short paper, really. It will feel long to you when you're writing it, but really, in the grand scheme of things, it's a very short paper. You don't have time to start really big. So start with one of the specific texts you're writing on, with either Scholes or your commercial. Okay, so the other kind of way I want to frame our talking about introductions today is that the main point of your introduction is to, number one, articulate your thesis, and number two, to make us see why that thesis is debatable. Remember we talked last time about how a good thesis needs to have two main qualities. It needs to be debatable and it needs to be provable. And especially at the beginning of the essay, debatability is really important because debatability is why your reader cares. Debatability is why. Debatability is you persuading your reader that they might actually learn something from your essay. That is to say that they don't already know your thesis. They don't already believe your thesis. If they did, why would they possibly want to read your paper? They wouldn't, right? I don't really want to read a paper about how Budapest is the capital of Hungary, because I already know that, right? So I want to learn something. I want to be convinced of something I don't already believe when I read a paper. So that's why it's really important to push the debatability of your thesis in your introduction very early in the paper, okay? So I'm going to propose a technique for doing that. And I'm going to ask you to try this out in your paper. And it's not going to be easy, and you're not going to get it right the first time, but that's okay because, as I say over and over again, writing is all about revision. So, so this technique you might call they say, I say. And it's the idea that you frame your thesis as a response to what someone else has said or what someone else might say or think, right? And that someone else can't be like a lunatic, right? The someone else has to be someone who's smart and who's educated, right? So so you establish debatability by kind of like debating with somebody, either a real somebody or a potential somebody. Okay, I'm going to get cut off here pretty soon, but let me start going through some sample they say, I says. Okay, so number one, my commercial, like Scholes's, promotes a vision of upward mobility and the American dream. However, my 2013 commercial suggests that the American dream has changed since Scholes was writing in the late 1980s. Now, upward mobility is more individualistic, about doing your personal best rather than overcoming systemic obstacles such as racism. Okay, you see how this writer does this, right? That they are using, so Scholes is their they say. And it's not that they're disagreeing with their they say, right? What they're saying is actually like, so Scholes had this whole theory about how commercials work, and he thought that a lot of times commercials are sort of hooking themselves into this idea of the American dream. And that, and then what this writer does is to say that needs to be updated for the 2010s, right? That particular vision of the American dream needs to be changed in order to account for the kinds of commercials that we're seeing today. And I have to tell you that I find the student's thesis more and more persuasive the more I see my students analyze commercials from today, which I think really do what this writer was talking about. But what I want us to pay attention to here is this they say, I say structure, right? Well, Scholes says this, and then the I say comes in to build upon the they say, right? It's like having a conversation with someone, but you have to contribute something, right? You can't be that person who's just like, You have to actually say something, add something to the conversation. That's the way this they say, I say is working. Okay, I will be back momentarily to start with number 2.